Welcome to the Leaderonomics Show. I'm with Professor Dr. Olaf Plötner. Olaf, great to have you here from ESMT in Berlin. Tell us a bit about yourself and what brings you here to Malaysia.
I was invited by my friends from Carl Pinter, and I'm happy to be here. And I have to confess, it's a shame, but it's my first time that I'm in Malaysia. But I got a wonderful impression, so I'm happy to be here. What I do, I just do my profession. I'm a professor, so I'm teaching. This is why I'm here.
Okay, and how did you get into this space? I mean, tell us a bit. I mean, I'm sure there's some great story.
This was, in the first part of my life, very normal. I was at university. I was not the worst student, so a professor asked me to do a PhD. I've done my PhD, but then I left the academics, and I was once with Boston Consulting Group and with Siemens. And then it was Siemens who asked me once if I would like to be a part of the adventure. The big German companies, they founded a business school. Siemens was a part of this, but this was also Daimler or Allianz, which is a big insurance company. They wanted to start a business school. And then they asked me if I would like to be involved in this crazy adventure to start a business school. So I joined there in, the first idea came up December 99 when I joined from Siemens. And then it was a plan that I only should build up the business school going back to Siemens. But then I told my CEO I will never come back because I love so much to be in the market of business schools. So I'm there now since almost 16 years
and
doing this what I do.
You primarily deal with competitive strategy and business, right?
This is, that's the second part of my job. So I'm at our business school. I'm in charge for the executive education. So not training young students, but more the senior managers.
Right.
This is my part of the business where I'm there, the dean. The other part is that I'm a professor and I do what all normal professors do. They do research and they do teaching. And my topic is then usually strategy, business strategy.
And tell us a little bit about some of the things that's happening in Europe and primarily among the companies up there. You know, how are they differentiating themselves and how are they driving?
When we see at Europe at this point of time, I would say the biggest developments are not in economics or management, but in politics, by the way. But that's another topic, and I know nothing about it. I'm a professor for management, so let's talk about
I think politics
management.
is being talked about everywhere with Donald Trump winning yesterday.
Yeah, since yesterday, the focus of Europe lost us, and we are all now more focused on the States. But with regard to management, the Western companies, I include the US companies. I have the big honor and pleasure to be a visiting professor in University of in Virginia, Darden School of Business. So I would say they are in a similar situation that one big challenge is coming from the growth in the world, that the biggest growth in the emerging markets. The growth of Europe is lousy. So if you would like to grow, you have to go to the emerging countries. And the emerging countries do not only look for premium products. There's a lower willingness to pay in the emerging countries. So you have to think about to have products in your portfolio that might fit to the low willingness to pay from the customers. This is the one big challenge, how to be successful in the emerging countries. The other big challenge is technology driven, and this is data. Data is changing all value chains. And you have adapt, otherwise you will lose the game.
And how is that? I mean, tell us a little bit about that. What does that mean?
A big impact is that I would say that if I see the technology-driven B2B companies, they are typically in Germany where we have cars and where we have machinery, but also if I see a company like General Electric in the States, so that you go more and more from the pure product business to more what I would call complex service solutions. Let me give you an example. This is the jet engine market. In former days, Rolls-Royce, GE, they sold jet engines. Today, there are 3,000 sensors in a jet engine. You know when a blade will break in a turbine. You do what we call proactive maintenance based on the data technology. And this had a huge impact on the business model because suddenly the airlines in the world, they said, you know, I don't want to buy anymore a jet engine. If you know with all your sensors everything about a jet engine, what's about this? I pay you by the hour I use the engine. So we call this power by the hour, introduced by Rolls-Royce. By the way, some years ago in '62, Rolls-Royce for the first time. But the true success of this business model came when data management entered this market for jet engine turbines. And now all the three big companies, Pratt & Whitney, GE, Rolls-Royce, they all changed completely this business model from selling pure products, a jet engine, to selling more a service, which is make airplanes fly. This is a service, and they are incentivized by the hours that the airplane is up in the air.
Right.
Yeah, power by the hour.
So that what has happened in the aviation industry is permutating into other industries, right? I mean, healthcare is very similar, and
we see this in many industries. By the way, the most dynamic part, I would say, is not B2B. I would say this is B2C. The biggest revolutions, I think we all didn't have a mobile phone 15 years ago. So this has changed the market completely, yeah. And so if you take for example the telephone market, where is Lucent? Where is Siemens? Where is Nokia? Where is Nortel? They were all big in this market. Right. They fade away, and we have now an Apple. We have Huawei. So the dynamics, and this I would say is also, it was driven by broadband, by data, where the old products were unable to adapt, and so we have these revolutionary developments even more in consumer goods, in big parts of consumer goods, than in these B2B markets. Gas turbine you cannot change as quickly as telephones. Technology is a little bit more complex.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break right now, and we'll be right back here on the Leaderonomics Show. Welcome back to the Leaderonomics Show. I'm here with Professor Olaf Plötner from the European School of Management and Technology, right? And we have to thank KPINTA for bringing you out here. You know, we were just having a fantastic conversation in terms of competitive advantage, you know, especially how companies need to differentiate themselves and the changing business models. Let's talk a little bit about China. I mean, you spent some time now as a visiting professor there. What do you see that China brings to the table? And how do organizations outside of China need to react or position themselves to win both in China and also globally?
In the end, China faces the same challenges. If you see the technology-driven companies where I do a lot of research, that the other companies in the States or Europe or Malaysia change. So this is for example, the new technology of data management, how to deal with this. There are different programs. Approaches, for example, we call this in Germany Industry 4.0. We talk in the States more about Internet of Things. We talk in China about China 2025.
These are all the same things.
It's not the same. It might have a different focus, but the overall challenge is quite similar. It is to make all the processes more efficient and to use the potential of new data technology. However, we are coming there in the nations from, we have different background. And I would say what is the biggest difference between the Western world and the Chinese world is the strong influence of the government. So if China, the government says we would like to do it, then there's a lot of support.
Okay.
This is a different kind of support that I would see in Germany.
Right.
To be a little bit provocative, but overall, I would say in Germany, the government would expect that the companies give money by taxes. What I see in China a lot is that the government invests into the company, that they build up their R&D. So from this support perspective and also from the overall plan, what is behind, this is much more centralized in China and much more decentralized in Germany, where each company is fighting for their own. This might be a key difference between these nations.
And do you see that evolving in Europe, where that model starts to be embraced by some of the newer countries that are out there?
Well, in the end, we have, and I'm very sad about it, but we just have a different development in Europe. Europe starts more to decentralize. This is, let's talk about the Brexit.
Yeah.
So instead of having the United States of Europe, we go a little bit back to the national thinking. And of course, if you see this with the investment funds, the smaller you are, the less you can invest and bring all in the country together or on the continent together. So I don't see us copying the Chinese model in Europe at this point of time.
Yeah.
About the US, we will see how the future goes on, as since yesterday we have a new president. We are all very curious how this will go on.
Yeah, I know it's a very changing world. But you look at SMEs, which is one area where you've dived into. Is there a fundamental difference between the SMEs in Europe and the SMEs out here in Asia, and how we operate?
So first, I would say I have very limited insight into your continent. I think I'm not allowed to say something about Asia, but what I see from my surface is that the countries in Asia are very different. So you said already, I know China a little bit, and my first experience here in Malaysia is that's hard to compare these countries. They have very different policies. They have a very different approach to rule the economy. And I would say the difference between China, Malaysia, and Australia, also Asia, is even higher than maybe between China and Germany.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And tell us a little bit about your research. I mean, you talked a little bit briefly earlier on some of the things, some of the new insights that you're grappling with. Tell us a bit about some of your focus.
Well, for me, coming from Germany and teaching and doing research about strategy, I focus very much on the two key challenges that I mentioned in the first part of our conversation. And this was that the Western companies have to go abroad, but abroad you have a low willingness to pay. So most of the Western companies, not only Western Europe, also US, if I see GE, you have those premium products, and now you have to go in countries with low willingness to pay. So how you make it happen to come up now with a product that might only have 30% of the price. So I call this no-frills technology.
Okay.
Yeah.
And has there been successful companies that have embraced that?
I would say they struggled at the start, but we have now many successful examples. If I take the two big ones here, like GE and Siemens, we find many examples. By the way, they love to talk about these examples. We have done a good job. I know both companies a little bit, and of course they failed sometimes too. So this is a part of my research. So how a company with premium quality is entering emerging markets, but also the other way around. If you're coming from the emerging markets, how you would address the premium markets. Also, there are many successful examples. So, for example, you can take the Indians, Tata, they acquired Jaguar, so they entered the premium market by an acquisition. So far, quite successful. Very similar to Geely, they bought Volvo. It's a Chinese company. Both companies, by the way, let the acquired companies quite independent, which might be smart. But we have also some other companies. I once wrote a case study about Weichai. This is coming from Shandong province in China. And Weichai, they acquired a big part of Kion, which is the second biggest forklift company in the world. They are located in Germany. And they tried more than only do a financial acquisition. They tried to work together. And I also see their very successful elements in this. So again, my research is how to come from premium to the emerging countries, how to go from the emerging countries to the premium countries, how to do the market entry. And the other big topic that I would have is how to go from a product-driven thinking more to what I would call complex service solutions. So this was what I mentioned in the first conversation. So far, you only have a jet engine. Now you sell a whole logistic concept for spare parts and power by the hour, or let's say Siemens here selling products for building technology, fire alarm system, heating, air condition, and they would go to Credit Suisse, a big bank, and they would say, instead of that, you buy our products, we can tell you how to save energy, and based on our new technology to save energy, we would like to have a share of your energy savings, which is quite a different business model. So to go from selling air conditioning as a product or heating system as a product, to go to this complex service solution, how to improve energy efficiency of a big institution like Credit Suisse, this is something where I do research.
Okay, that's fantastic. But it's very tough, right? I mean, for smaller companies to do that. I mean, the GE and Siemens can, but can smaller companies be able to be that sophisticated?
I have a different opinion of this. Why do I say so? The big corporations, they have a burden, and this is their heritage. So, you have now 2,000 sales engineers. They are used to sell jet engine turbines. They cannot sell complex service solutions to Air China or Lufthansa.
So they're stuck in that legacy.
They are stuck. So they have to change to the new business models. While there's a big opportunity for small and medium companies that you use the new data technology, you enter a new business model and you don't have the heritage of all the old stuff. This is maybe your machine park, but also your culture. Old culture maybe has taken away flexibility. You're small, medium, you're flexible, and you can build up, based on new media, partnerships all over the world and being global from the day one on, based on new technology. So I see there more opportunity for the SME than I see a challenge
for the big guys.
However, we have to confess that if you enter new business models, new technology, usually you need a lot of money. So you have people that give you the money.
Right. Plus, we have a good private equity market. I mean, to some extent, at this point
in
time.
We don't have so much in Germany. Maybe that might be a big advantage of your country, that you have more venture capital. This is, by the way, where the US has a huge advantage towards Europe.
Right.
So there is the money to experiment. We are in Europe more risk averse, and that's hard for SMEs.
All right, that's great. Going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back here with the final segment here on the Leaderonomics Show. Welcome back. We're with Professor Olaf Plötner. Professor Olaf, you were talking a little bit about legacies and how that weighs down companies, especially the big companies. Does that same thing apply for countries where Europe has this huge tradition of doing things in a certain way? Is that at this point, if you mentioned earlier where Europe's kind of slow growth and low performance, is that one of the things that's curtailing Europe's growth? The fact that it's a developed country and most of them are developed and there is no real goal, or again, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Between the lines, I hear quite a lot of skepticism towards Europe in your question, and this is the common opinion at this point of time. Yes, Europe is slow. Europe is losing. If you see the market shares worldwide, usually most of the industries we go down. By the way, the big winner at this point of time is China, taking over market leadership in many industries. However, if you allow me, I would like to have there some distance from the academic perspective. If I see life, if I see the world, there's always up, there's always down. If you buy shares, I would now buy European because they are down. Now it's down, everything is bad, and everything where I look in China, it's growing. But maybe that is not in 20 years. We will see how this goes on. Of course, Europe has to change. We are pretty much stuck. We are not able to change the smallest rule. So we just tried to make an agreement with Canada. And because 20,000 people in Belgium said we don't want it, whole Europe was not able to sign this agreement. So obviously the structures are not there to be flexible. But that's always the phase before you change. You have to stuck, you have to be in a very bad situation, and if you are in a bad situation, that brings you to change. I hope that the European bad situation will not be like our last one. I would say the biggest change that we had in Europe was after the Second World War. France has been the enemy for centuries, Germany and France, and the catastrophe of the Second World War was as big that I think everybody said, now we have to change. And suddenly, my best friends are coming from France. It really has changed, being in a very bad situation. So from the day-to-day business, I would say, Europe is in a bad shape, Asia is in a good shape, but give us some time to look where we are in 20 or 30 years. Europe has to change to be successful in the future, and if they realize more and more that they have big challenges, then they will. Still, the wealth is still quite high. By the way, let me share with you one figure. We have there in Western Europe, this is 70% more or less of the worldwide population. We have 25% of the GDP, but we have 50% of the social welfare in the whole world. So these few million people share 50% of the social welfare. Right. On the other hand, politically, we live in peaceful times. I know you do too at this point of time in Asia, but
Relatively.
however, very different. So I would say you should not say Europe has no future.
Okay.
I say it will have a future, but we have to change a lot.
Sure. And what would be some gold mines in Europe? I mean, surely there are some companies that are worth looking into and saying, you know, these are the guys that even Asians can learn from.
You mean what we can learn from Asia?
Yeah, what Asia can learn from Europe?
That's different. I don't have to tell you what you can learn to say, hey, we are great and you better should learn this. This is, by the way, an attitude that you find very often in these old nations.
But you mentioned this a number of times, you know, the sophistication in doing proposals that comprehensive. I mean, the number of things that I think we have to continue to evolve.
So overall, I would say, but this is deeply cultural rooted, and there I really now once take the Germans. We have many disadvantages, but we also have some advantages. I would say, although we have scandals with Volkswagen and diesel and whatever, but there is a deep-rooted passion for quality. This is what I see. And this is not with the CEOs. I talk to normal workers. If they produce a product, they are committed to quality. Once somebody told me that in the States you work for your boss, in Japan you work for your company, in Germany you work for your task. You're committed that this product will have highest quality. And this is still something where I would not say others could learn, but let's say that has given us a lot of advantages in a globalized economy. And I'm very happy that you still buy German cars. So yesterday I spoke to my appreciated friend Jager. He has a Mercedes. I said, thank you for buying German. Why you took a Mercedes? Because of quality. So this is not bad. And let me also, they're very unpolite and unfriendly. When I am traveling through Asia, I not always see the same level of product quality. So, including, by the way, some scandals with milk that is poison or whatever. So this commitment to quality might be something that might be interesting to take over. However, you cannot learn this tomorrow. This is deeply culturally rooted, I would say.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about disruptive technology. You know, what's your take on it? I mean, there's a lot of disruption that's happening. So how do leaders, like, you know, CEOs of companies, as they see their business model being eroded, you know, what advice would you give them, you know, in terms of how they take their company forwards?
First rule is you have to change or you will lose. Second is if you're overconfident about your own capabilities, you will lose too. So calm down, be quiet. So we all talk about Internet of Things. If you would like to change your company tomorrow to be a perfect new fancy technology data-based corporation, you might fail. Don't be overambitious and don't think you're the super CEO, you can do everything. We call this in psychology, there was a research project of Kahneman once about it, the illusion of control. The more successful you are, the more you think you have everything under control, which is not true. So don't be overconfident in changes, but of course you have to change. The world is moving, this is why companies have to move. That's very simple.
How do you change? I mean, the pace of change is so drastic.
I would challenge this.
Really? Okay.
Yes, I would challenge this. I know this is very popular, and here allow me also to be in the shoes of an academic.
Go ahead.
This is the story of all CEOs that are here. The changes have never been as strong as at this point of time. So what a great challenge do I have here? Let's look at other centuries. Let's go to the 15th century. So 1492, Columbus, they had America. It was a new continent. There was, in Europe, there was a new religion. This was Martin Luther coming from this was Catholic so far, suddenly Protestant. This was Mr. Copernicus who found out these years that the world is through the sun and not the sun around the world. This is a completely mind change with technologies. By the way, Martin Luther was only successful because there was a new technology called book printed. In Europe, the Chinese had it before, but this is how he could make the whole marketing for his new ideology based on printed book. And by the way, then he took the Bible instead of Latin. He was doing this in German language so the normal people could understand. I would say, a completely revolutionary time. We can talk about another century, what has happened in 1890 or something like this. So Karl Marx is coming up with a new ideology. We have a new technology with cars.
Sure.
You don't have to wait too long that airplanes will come up.
This is just something that happens all the time.
All the time. But again, let me be cautious here because CEOs are my customers. Of course, today also they face very hard times. There's a lot of change, but I would say this is not a privilege of these years that we have so much change. There were always years in change, and I would not even think about the decades where we had severe wars. So what has been the change after the Second World War in Europe? Much bigger. But again, CEOs have very hard times, and I'm very happy that sometimes they call us and call Carpenter to say, give us some advices because our times are so hard. Right. We are always happy to do business with them.
Right. And final question, if you were to give advice to a company that's trying to revolutionize itself, trying to change, trying to embrace this 21st century business model, trying to become more sophisticated, what sort of advice would you give them? What would be one or two things they should be really looking at and considering?
Not by research, but by pure empirical evidence, what I see in the company. What is most underestimated is the willingness of the people that you have at this point of time to change. It's about people. Companies are about people. So it's great that the CEO would say, now we have to change our business model from selling turbines to leasing turbines, whatever, selling power by the hour. Do you have the right people to do this based on capabilities? And second, are they willing to change? If you talk to the people, usually everybody says change is needed. Yep. If you ask them, how will you personally change now, people become very calm. So how to take your people, how to motivate the people to come with you to change, and also being hard enough to say we cannot motivate the people. So this is, by the way, what IBM has done when they sold Lenovo their products, their PC business to Lenovo, and they said we go more in complex service solutions. They laid off 10,000 of people, and they said those guys cannot follow. They bought in Pricewaterhouse Consulting that was following more their new business model with selling this complex service solutions. But once I think you also have to, you need to do this decision that you say, we checked our people, these are the capabilities, this is the willingness, and the result was 1/3 of our people cannot follow. So to change our company, we also sometimes have to change people. But this is my European route. You have to be very cautious with this. You have a responsibility as a company also for your employees. So we don't want to follow the hire and fire system. You better go to Carpenter and ESMT and educate your employees that they follow you. Let motivate them, but also, I mean this very serious, not only as advertisement. Right. Build up the capabilities of the employees that they can follow your changes. I think this is very important, and this is underestimated, the people aspect, I would say.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a wonderful conversation. We're here with Professor Olaf Plötner from ESMT in Berlin. Thank you again for being here.
My pleasure to be in Malaysia. Thank you so much for inviting me.